I just think Marcelo's going to come in and out of this podcast like a revolving door because he is. It's a big talking point, and I think like I agree that the thing with Marcelo is that if he's not attacking, what does he bring to the table? Because he's not defending either. And when he lost his offense, and he's had spurts. I think it was the A-Bar game, if I'm remembering correctly, where he had a good game. And certain games like that, he can contribute, but at this level, it's hard. And I agree with you. I thought he was lost, but I thought we could transition into some of the tactical things. And I thought you could talk about what you saw in that first half in particular to start the game, whether it's Real just disjointed press, whether it's the defending, whether it's leaving channels open. I will just throw this at you before you start. I did ask Tuchel about his preparation for this game and whether he anticipated Real just to go with 4 at the back or 3 at the back, and if it changes game plan at all. And he said that they thought that Real were going to go 4-3-3. And they planned for it that way. And when he saw the lineup, he basically went into the locker room with his assistant coaches, and they quickly gave some different instructions to the attackers and on how to exploit that. He didn't elaborate too much on that, unfortunately, but I'll just throw that at you and go wherever you want with it.
Okay, that's really interesting, and that makes this more impressive to me because I thought Chelsea had a really well-defined game plan for breaking our press, and primarily in 2 ways. Just before I get there, I just want to say real quick, like the major criticism I have of Zidane's tactics today is the press, and it's all defensive. Offensively, I think for the reasons Eduardo outlined, for the fatigue issues, I'm actually kind of like meh about anything we could have done to really break Chelsea down. I just don't see what the realistic options are to like blow them away. And so, yeah, I mean, it is what it is with that. Like, to me, we progressed through this tie by just kind of holding on tight defensively, not giving anything away, and then getting something on a counter or on a set piece like we saw today. So having said that, let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, so there were 2 main ways that basically Chelsea were able to break down our press. So to kind of set it up, you kind of need to understand our press first, right? So Chelsea are building nominally from like a 5-3-2 with Mason Mount in midfield, and we're kind of looking to press that with Vinicius and Benzema on 2 of the center backs, and Modric steps up onto Rudiger. And Modric generally steps up to lead the press, right? Except this time we're doing it against a back 3. And so if I just play the video here, you kind of see that, right? So that's what happens. And Mason Mount, as you can see on the screen, is the free player. But what's happening is tactically, Modric should be able to block off that passing lane. So how do Chelsea adjust to that? So if you see the movements they make here, they actually basically move into a double pivot. And Mason Mount was kind of doing this throughout the entire game, where he was a central midfielder and then he was a left winger. And so that creates a better passing angle. He's moving, horizontally to get into better spaces to receive the ball. And so what's going to happen is now Militao has to cover him. And if Militao goes to him, what happens? It opens up the lane for Timo Werner to run in behind, and it's difficult for Rafael Varane to get there, basically, right? So that was one price. So this is a very kind of general way of describing it. It didn't always manifest in the exact patterns that I showed and described, but that was kind of the first way Chelsea were exploiting it. It was Modric stepping up, who we already know is gassed and has a huge job to cover shadow the lane into Mount. That wasn't happening, and they were able to find him. And I actually have in-game examples that I'll show after this.
So,
sorry about that.
While you're bringing up that example, I assume you're going to bring up that 9th-minute example. But if not, what did you?
No, go ahead.
I'll give you my thoughts on like how you would counteract that. But you tell me what you would do. So I think our defensive line was. I mean, if we're going to press, then we have to press properly. And I think our defensive line was too far back behind where the midfield was. And so, to your point, when Mount was picking up the ball, all right, Militao, if you're gonna mark Mount, then mark Mount properly. Don't be a couple seconds late, because then that through ball is on. And so I think the whole team could have maybe taken a step forward, and then the weak side wide fullback would tuck in to provide support to the center backs. So that would have been Marcelo, since the ball was with Rudiger. Is that how you would counteract that play, or would you do something differently?
I think it's a valid way to do it. So the first thing I would do is not press at all, but assuming that we have to press. Yeah. I just wanted that like out there on the record. So what I would do is kind of how Chelsea were pressing us actually when they did press, which they were doing it out of like a same nominal formation 5-3-2, except the far side player, so Mount or Christian Pulisic, would drop onto the far side central midfielder. So it was a 2 versus 3, and you're relying on the central striker. So in this case, it would be Benzema, or depending on how they shift, it could be Benzema or Vinicius, to be really good about like blocking off access back to the other side. So take the underload against the back three and make it wing oriented. So like look to shift them there. And if they switch, then you have someone coming out of midfield to press, right? And it just makes it a little easier. Now, athletically, there would still be some strains, right? Because again, Modric and Kroos are gassed. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but Mason Mount, the way he was covering ground every time we switched play to Andreas Christensen was incredible. And he gave Militao, when we switched to Militao, I said switch to Christensen. When we switched to Militao, he closed him down instantly, right? And barely gave him any space to breathe. So it probably wouldn't be perfect, but forcing the team to switch play accurately and quickly generally is like the textbook way of trying to press without like going man to man against the center back. So that would be the way I'd go about it.
So there's a point about our center backs, sorry to interrupt, which is both Militao and Nacho are much better at correcting after a player has been beaten on midfield than at anticipating the play. And the high press demands from them that they anticipate the play all the time. And that's something that Ramos and Varane at their top do really well, but Nacho and Militao are not that good at that. And so they play well, they're in their own half, and they see that Modric is being beaten or Casemiro is being beaten, and they have to go there, get the ball. They do that really well. But the timing when they have to anticipate the play is not as good. That's why they really look fantastic when we're under siege and we need to defend and we need to, because they are really good with that. Mm-hmm. But when your defense, when your last line is on midfield, that's one of the reasons why we've been running backwards most of the first half, because the press, as you explained, was not. They knew a way to beat our press, but also we didn't have the right players to push the team forward up to that extent.
Especially when Militao is 1 versus 1 with Mount all the time, right? And he has to cover that space. You have to be perfect. Like, this is a situation where there's no margin for error. And there were 2 moments early on, so 5th minute and 11th minute, where Mount turns him, and I think the second time he ends up fouling him, right? So those were early warning signs. So the second way that they exploited the press was through Conte. So I already described how we set up, so I'm just going to go through the play, right? So this time it's coming to Christensen, and you see they're adjusting to 3-4-3 shape. Kroos and Modric had Kroos had man marking jobs on Conte, right? And Casemiro on Jorginho. And so they're just going to play a wing combination down the right-hand side, and Conte is going to escape that, right? So technically, building down their right side, right? Chelsea have we have the numbers, right? It's not an overload situation on the other side where Mason Mount is getting free. This is a situation like where I'll just play through the whole thing again, where they're breaking our press on the right-hand side by third man runs that Conte is making down into the channel. And Kroos was just, whether he was tired, we know he's kind of weak tracking back, whether he wasn't fast enough, whether he wasn't recognizing it, they were just exploiting that the entire time.